Hello and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm one of your hosts. Every Wednesday and Friday, we bring you interviews with female and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. Today's guest is artist Ann Johnson. Ann is a predominantly print artist in her solo art career. However, she also teaches art history at a university in Texas. So she's kind of in it with her job as well as with her artist practice outside of that sphere. I don't even know if I can describe how much I enjoyed this conversation with Ann. I'm grateful that she took the time to chat with me because I learned so much. And I hope that if you're listening to this, I understand if you have to listen because you're in a moving vehicle. Do not watch this on YouTube if you are in a moving vehicle. However, if you have the opportunity, please go check out this episode, especially on my Freeman Furnishings YouTube channel. That's where I put the podcast episodes, the video, just because you can see behind Ann all of her work, and it's amazing. So that's what drew me to her, and I'm so glad that she said yes to getting to chatting with me and telling me more about her journey and what inspires her and all of that great stuff. So I know that you will enjoy this as much as I enjoy talking with Ann. But before we hop into it with her, I need to give a big shout out and thanks to the patrons over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Lee at Lee Runyon, Annette 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Woodshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy at Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Toolmom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, the Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your continued ongoing support. You really do help support this podcast and help in producing 2 episodes a week every week. And also, I should say before we get into the interview, welcome back, everybody. This is the first new episode since the end of last year. So happy 2022. I'll just leave it at that and let you all have your own feelings about that. But happy to be back with a brand new episode, especially with Ann. So with no further ado, let's hop on into our conversation. Well, and I like to start by asking my guests to introduce themselves. Would you do that for me?
I'll be glad to. My name is Ann Johnson, also known as Soul Sister. I was born in London, raised in Wyoming, and I live now in Houston, Texas. I'm a Texas transplant. Sorry about our governor. Ted Cruz, I'm so sorry. But I teach at Prairie View A&M, where I graduated, which is an HBCU, Historically Black College and University. I graduated from there, taught there. I went to the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. I was actually their first online graduate ever.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
Okay.
so that was interesting.
Yeah,
And
now I have to, this is totally just because of my own personal curiosity, and I'm actually looking to go to grad school and study art. And so I was curious, if I don't happen to get into my local university,
right.
what would it be like to take an online art, do art school online? What was it? I'm just curious what it was like.
It was the most work I've ever done in my life. It was
Yeah.
like every week was like an exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it. Oh my goodness, it was a lot of work. But I was older. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I was in my late 30s when I started. So older students are much more mature and
Mm-hmm.
more focused.
Right.
And it's myself and Denise Williams. She and I, we were like the guinea pigs for everything. So you might have a class with just 3 students.
Right. Yeah.
But the flip side is that you can get all that attention from your professors.
Mm-hmm.
And I just had a professor, her name is Sarah Barsness, which just allowed me to fly.
Okay.
And so that was the great part of it. But it was stressful.
I bet. Yeah.
I did go. It's in San Francisco, so I
Mhm.
did go a couple of times a year.
Okay.
Um, that was in the early days of Skype.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
the cool thing is all of my thesis, my prep, and all that stuff,
Yeah.
all my meetings, they're recorded
Oh,
and they're
okay.
documented.
Yeah.
So
That's
I
pretty
have
cool.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was yeah, I just went and toured the art department at my local university. And yeah, I'm having I have no, like, my bachelor's degree is not in anything art. I haven't taken art
Right.
history or anything like
Yeah.
that. And she's talking to me and I said, you do have to understand too, I am a non-traditional grad student. I mean, I'm 40. Like, I
Right.
probably,
Right.
I mean, some of
Yeah.
these kids, if I was hitting the game real early, could be my kids. So
I was the same way. I was the same way, you know.
yeah.
So yeah, you are the older student, but
Mhm.
you're much more serious.
Yes. Yeah,
And
I've got like a very focused reason for like wanting to go. It's not,
yeah,
still, I mean, to some degree, still wondering what I'm going to do with my life, but in a different way than
the
in my
mind of
early
an
20s.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're in Iowa, right?
Yes. Yep.
So Elizabeth Catlett,
Hmm.
yeah, she went to University of Iowa.
Yeah, that's the university I live in the Iowa City area, which is
Right.
where that's at. So, yep.
Yeah.
Um, so I digressed there, but I had to ask the question of what it was like to do it
I'm
online.
here to help. It might not. I could imagine what, because we would have to take classes like it was a really interesting conversational class
Yeah.
about justice and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. I can imagine the conversations now,
Oh yeah.
as because that was pre-Obama
Hmm.
when I went, so I can imagine. I'm quite sure the professor had to stop class on several occasions.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
So okay, so in your intro, I mean, you gave your kind of history a bit, but I want to dive into that a little bit more and just kind of learn more about your story. I mean, especially just even born in London and then raised here. Um, what was the move? What, like, military parents or
Yes, yes. My
okay.
father was in the Air Force, so I was born in London.
Hmm.
We left when I was about 3. I
Okay.
was a kid, so
Yeah.
I was raised in Wyoming.
Okay.
And if you're in a military landscape, it's
Hmm.
a very close knit community.
Yeah.
And usually when I say Wyoming, I get the side eye, like there's black people in Wyoming. Like, yeah, it's a
Well,
military
I was gonna
base.
be like, it doesn't feel like you probably made
No,
yourself alone, but
no, it's a strong black community there.
okay.
The 90% is military related,
Hmm.
but there is a percentage that is Buffalo Soldier related. The
Okay.
blacks in the Wild West that you
Yes.
don't always hear about. And there's lots of black churches. I mean, I grew up like most black kids grew up, just in a
Okay.
predominantly white state.
Yes.
And it's very cultural. It's like a gumbo because everybody's from somewhere.
Hmm.
And so every weekend there was a party at somebody's house. All the kids are stuffed in one room.
Yep.
Parents are playing pinochle. And if it was Miss Wilson who was from New Orleans, they had gumbo that night.
Hmm.
If it was somebody who was from South Carolina, you had shrimp and grits that night. So it was. And then if you were stationed in Japan or
Hmm.
wherever, you had these really great ghetto egg rolls. So it was a great. I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It's lifelong friends for my
Hmm.
parents. You know, and it was in the days where anybody could smack you on your tail if you were bad.
Yeah.
That's just who it was. Yes, how it was back then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. I mean, did you get to stay in Wyoming the whole time, or did you move from
No, my
there.
dad retired. He
Okay.
retired in Wyoming.
Okay.
I'm the youngest,
Gotcha.
so I don't remember any of those moves.
Mm-hmm.
And he retired when I was probably in third grade.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And my mother was a nurse.
All
She
right.
retired as a nurse with the VA.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one brother that's still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, sound strong community. Get to grow up in a strong community.
Oh, definitely. Strong community, strong church community. My
Yeah.
father was an activist.
Okay.
He helped establish the Martin Luther King holiday in the state.
Mm.
My second grade teacher was the first Black congressional member in the state of Wyoming.
Okay.
So, I mean, it was very much more
Yeah.
culturally rich than people would assume.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Were you into art or creating as a kid?
I was always the creative, I was the baby, so I get
Yeah.
away with everything. But my mother is very, she's like every woman. She gardens to this day. She's just turned 84. And
Okay.
she still gardens. She paints. She oil paints, watercolor. I mean, she made hats. So I was always around that. My
Mm-hmm.
brother, he would do cartoon drawings and things like that.
Okay.
But most of that creative energy came from her.
Mm-hmm.
My father taught himself how to play piano.
Okay.
So he was a minister of music. And so we were kind of that house.
Mm-hmm.
We had all the good records and all the fashion. Fashion was my thing first.
Okay.
And I went to fashion school when I left Wyoming. I left
Okay.
Cheyenne. But my father, he's a mason. They're mason in Eastern Stars. And they would bring in the Ebony Fashion Fair every year.
Oh, nice.
And I was obsessed. I mean, if those shows were just the coolest fashion shows ever. And after the show, they would come over to our house and they'd have like this big, potluck. And the
Mm-hmm.
models would be so happy because they've been on a bus
Yeah.
for months. And, it's just this big
Yeah.
home cooked meal and
Yeah.
everything. And my goal in life was I'm going to work for the Ebony Fashion Fair. I used to write them every single day. And finally, the secretary called my dad and said, please tell your daughter to stop writing. She's like, Mr. Johnson, she doesn't want that job. All they do is go around the world and do fashion shows. Yeah. I wanted to be a fashion show coordinator and
Yeah.
things like that. So I ended up going to fashion school in Arlington, Texas, which is
Okay.
between Dallas and Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Barter Fashion College, which is a 2-year school. And I did some fashion show work and makeup and things like that. I did a lot of that stuff. And then I ended up going to Prairie View. They took all my credits. And I
Okay.
transferred into Prairie View as a junior.
Mm-hmm.
And because when you go to those specialized schools, you learn so much.
Yeah.
When you go to a university, it's your junior year before you really start learning
Right.
anything that you
Right.
like.
Yep.
And so when I got there, I was so advanced, I was able to teach for scholarship money.
Oh, wow.
So the
Nice.
money they
Yeah.
would have paid an adjunct for one class,
Mm-hmm.
they gave me in scholarship.
Nice.
So yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So what was it? Why shift gears from fashion to art?
Because art was always my natural talent. And
Okay.
once I got to Prairie View, well, in between Prairie View and Barter, I went 1 year at a junior college. It's called HGC. Used to call it Harvard on the Freeway, and it was a junior college, a TCJC South, which was meant it was in the hood, and that was where I started painting with my feet. I just
Okay.
kind of stepped in some paint, thought it was cool, and at that time I had the Gumby, haircut like Bobby Brown,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, that'll look cool." And I did a self portrait. So for years, that's where the Soul Sister comes from.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So then when I got to Prairie View, I just started going back to my natural talent,
Mm-hmm.
of course, which was art.
Okay. And I mean, I very recently found you on Instagram, and I honestly, I was like, whoa, I was blown away by the what you put your art on now. Like, even like a leaf. I was like, how Like how? Just
That's
blown
the
away.
printmaking. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
printmaking process. Like I said, I was an older student,
Right.
so my teacher really embraced that I was a little stubborn, and I just refused to do an addition. I'm
Mhm.
probably the only printmaking major that ever graduated without doing an addition. It was boring to me.
Right.
I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I started printing on odd things. It's the intaglio printmaking process.
Hmm.
I think I have a plate in front of me. So it's a process where an image is printed. I do. Sure, lucky day.
It's my
This
lucky
is like
day.
this is like a printmaking plate right here.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I see the.
And so the image, it's a transparency,
Hmm.
and then it's transferred to the plate by light.
Okay.
And then I just put a little heat on it,
Hmm.
blow dryer, heat gun for a minute, and then I'm able to print on it.
Okay.
So that process, you coat your plate with ink and then you wipe it off, and then the
Hmm.
ink rests below the surface. And then my printing press back here, I can put anything on top of it and run it through the press, and the image transfers. Now
That's
that
just
sounds
awesome.
it sounds easy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it's not. I mean, again, watching
Yeah,
some of the, or seeing some of the delicate pieces that you're printing onto.
yeah. The first
Yeah.
odd thing I printed on was a corn husk,
Yeah.
and I was honoring my great grandmother who was a Black Indian. So it was
Hmm.
just kind of an exploration.
Yeah.
All of my MFA work was about her
Okay.
and that Native American. And coming from our
Mhm.
part of the country, it's huge
Yeah.
powwows.
Yeah.
I realized that the daddy of them all was really the daddy of them all. The rodeo frontier days. I just thought that was a commercial.
Yeah.
But going to the rodeos here once or twice,
Hmm.
they would say, "Well, he was a winner at the Daddy of them all in Cheyenne, Wyoming." I was like, "Oh wow." I never realized it because you
Right.
get, when you're around that your whole life.
Yeah.
So I used to love to go to the powwows. That was my favorite thing to do. And it was mostly plains.
Hmm.
And they would come and they would set up, they would have teepees, all that stuff,
Yeah.
set up for the 2 weeks of Frontier
Hmm.
Days. And if I could go every day to the powwows, I would. I was fascinated.
Hmm.
And so as I got older, and particularly in grad school, and I was just infatuated with my great grandmother because I never knew her, but
Right.
they would always talk about her. And she had
Hmm.
these long braids, and they called her Indian Emma. And just it was an exploration.
Hmm.
So I did the corn husk first, and I went from corn husk to feathers.
Okay.
And I started with like a turkey feather, and then a marabou feather, which was much more mysterious. And then from feathers to leaves,
Hmm.
leaves to cotton, which is now a whole nother
Yep.
narrative and a whole nother
Yep.
side of the
Yep.
family. So yeah, gauze. I just print on a lot of. When I printed on gauze, it was specifically about women
Hmm.
and the history of gynecology.
Mm.
The butchering of the black woman's
Yep.
body in the
Yep.
name of science.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm very experimental. That's why I call myself an experimental printmaker.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just had, not too long ago, I had another guest on who helped with the fabrication for the installation of the mothers of gynecology,
Mm,
where a series of three, I think three metal sculptures to
hmm.
honor the three Black women who had
Yeah.
been, essentially tortured
Well,
and
yeah.
butchered.
Tortured,
Um,
butchered. Yeah.
yeah. So that that's actually in that interview was the sadly the first time that I had learned of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and that's why, this foolery about critical race theory, which is different. It's not
Yeah.
even taught in grade schools. It's just
No.
so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that is slowly erasing history.
Yes.
Oh, oh, Texas is a doozy. You should see what these kids are not learning here. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's why I can't teach on that level.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be fired and on the news. I cannot teach on that level. It's just so ridiculous. But you know, you're in your 40s and
Yeah.
and you didn't know about it.
No.
Who else doesn't know about it in
Yeah.
med school?
Right.
And when I was doing the research for that, it was hard,
I'm sure.
because he was so callous, the doctor. And in his notes, he would say, well, Lucy cried for 2 hours today. It's no sedatives, no nothing. They were just being butchered. And he would
Yeah.
she cried for 2 hours today. So we put her on the table again. It was just
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
it was an object and not a woman.
Yes.
It was
Yes.
property, chattel.
Yes. Yeah, I am not far into it at all yet, but
Mhm.
I'm not a big reader, but I'm a big audio
Yeah.
listener. So
Mhm.
I got the book 1619, and I think I'm about, it's an 18 and a half hour audiobook, I
Mhm.
think, and I'm about
Mhm.
2.5 hours in, and
Yeah.
I've already, like, I have to take it slow,
Yeah.
just because it breaks my heart. every single
Yeah.
every
It's a
single
lot
minute
to
of it,
take in.
it
Yeah.
just breaks my heart. Though I was interested to learn that the author of the 1619 project, which then turned into the book, um, is from Waterloo, Iowa, which is where like my mom and most of my family grew up.
That's
And learning
interesting.
about, like, obviously I am clearly as white as they can come. So most of my family is too. And growing up, hearing their perspective of
Hmm.
race in the city of Waterloo, and then now hearing her perspective, and
Right.
just like personally wanting to go back and like scream at my family, but like to just be like, you have no idea, like you had no understanding
Yeah.
of like why
It,
the
it was
entire east
different.
side
Yeah.
is black because of redlining, like, and not even
Right.
understanding that terminology.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for being raised in the West, really the
Yeah,
Wild
yeah,
Wild West,
yeah.
because, oftentimes, and I can relate to a number of students at HBCUs
Hmm.
on both ends, because in Wyoming, although we had a black community, there still wasn't a lot of us.
Yeah.
So it was nothing for me or someone else to be the only black in the classroom.
Hmm.
And you had to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, but I like to say it's a different kind of racism in Wyoming. Because I live in the South now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's not nearly as blatant. Um, and Now the hood is off of everybody from that
Hmm.
last administration.
Yeah.
Everybody took their Klan hoods off,
Hmm.
but it was different. But Houston is the crazy thing about Texas, and redistricting was the first thing I learned about when I first came to college. My first day at a black college,
Yeah.
I had an old teacher. His name was Hewlin Davis. Hewlin, that's a good
Yeah.
old name.
Oh yeah.
Hewlin.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, there's two types of people in this world, the haves and the have-nots. You are the have-nots. Now, let me tell you about redistricting.
Hmm.
And I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
crazy thing about Texas is Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio, they're all Democratic cities.
Hmm.
It's just that the weight of the votes, the higher weight is in these smaller towns.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
crazy.
Yep. Yep. Oh, yeah. I'm sure we could spend hours talking about
Yes, yes, that's a whole nother. That's a lecture series.
yes, yes. Um, but I do want to dive into, especially since, the people generally listen to the podcast, but I'm going to strongly encourage them to go watch the podcast because I get to see
Uh-huh.
behind you all of your work.
Yeah,
Um, and
yeah.
again, that's another thing that drew me. The first image I saw of your work, I was like, oh, I need to dive in
Hmm.
on this further and look at it more, and just the powerful images, especially. I feel like, is it all women? Is it always focused on women?
Not all the time.
Okay.
Um, uh, Initially, when I started, I just did members of my family
Mm-hmm.
on Feathers and Leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2014, where it says Cole, the
Mm-hmm.
remix of the classic Vibe poster,
Yep. Yep.
uh, See, there's only a certain generation that understands
Yes.
that. Oh, I miss the 90s. But I'm in an artist collective called Rue.
Okay.
That is for the baddest ass artists you'll ever meet. And I'm not just saying it because I'm in it,
Right.
but this one right, that one right there,
Yep.
Lovey Olivia, she just looks badass. Lovey Olivia, Rebecca Bain, and Delita Martin,
Okay.
all on Instagram. So we form an artist collective, Rue.
Okay.
And through Rue, it really for all of us, we have just grown because
Hmm.
we could push and inspire each other. But Rue came to be, I was at a creative capital workshop. And during that workshop, I didn't know Rebecca and I didn't know Lovey, but I kept hearing there's always that person, well, women are not getting a chance to do this. And I was like, oh, who is that?
Yeah.
I want to meet her. Yeah, that's the person I want to have lunch with.
Yeah. Yeah.
She's just going on and on and on and on. So we connected, and her work is she's self-taught.
Okay.
She taught herself how to do fresco. Come on.
Okay.
And so we applied for an exhibition called Rue. We were
Hmm.
denied, and so also from Creative Capital formed an organization called Print Matters,
Hmm.
which is a printmaking collective.
Hmm.
And we started this exhibition series called Print Houston.
Hmm.
And through Print Houston, we got all the institutions, including the museums, to have exhibitions during the summers.
Hmm.
So I was the only Black person. Again, that's a theme. And I was going to make sure that there was a Black presence.
Hmm.
And so that's how Rue came to be. So each year through our exhibits, I would push myself to challenge to do something different.
Yeah.
So in 2013 was the first time I printed members outside of my family
Okay.
on feathers and leaves. So I started printing students
Hmm.
and people from the community. We have a very rich community here.
Hmm.
And that was the nesting series. That's the first piece on my website that you see.
Yep.
And so that's I would just from there I would just keep growing and growing. And over the last couple of years, the majority of my work has been women.
Hmm.
In 2015, my work shifted totally, more specifically towards activism.
Mm.
Sandra Bland, I drive by that space every day where she
Yes.
was pulled over because I work there, and it's hard.
Hmm.
And it's, especially in the early days, it was terrifying. We would follow each other off campus just to make sure we could get to the high, literally like this. Don't forget your
Yes.
blinker. Don't forget your blinker. And you shouldn't be like that going to work.
No.
And
No.
so, yeah, my work started to shift a little bit towards activism. A person told me, use your art as your activism because everybody's not built for the streets,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so it started, I did the Converse Real Talk series with that, with the images on the leaves.
Yep.
And then in 2019, I did an exhibition called Harvest with another badass artist, Kaneem Smith, who was in the Dirty South exhibition.
Mm.
And that's when I started exploring gynecology.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had another solo show called Acknowledge. And that's when I did my first ironing board, which was just a fluke because my sister I'm coming to town, I'm gonna need to iron because she knows me.
Yeah.
And I'm a Downey wrinkle free girl.
Yeah.
So I pulled out the iron and it had some spots on it. It was rusty, and I was like, and she just looked at me and was like, oh God. And then I started doing, because I see these ironing boards as
Yeah.
it's like a military badge.
Yeah.
And women of color, so many women of color for their survival have to take care of someone else's family before
Yep.
they can take care of their own.
Yep.
And so that's where these ironing boards come from. And they're about to be featured. That's my Rue crew behind me, with the exception of Rebecca's actually a person I went to church with. She just took great selfies. But they're going to be in a window of we have an art space called Longdale Art Center. And they're doing a series of artists whose work is going to be enlarged and placed in a window. And so these ironing boards are going to be there, and it's a series. It's called See Me, because as women we're often not seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Un- extremely unfortunate intro.
Yeah.
Yeah. um, why, what was the seed or the initiate, like what got you going down the route of gynecology?
Well, I teach African American art history,
Okay.
and we have just the coolest president at Prairie View. She was Ivy League. She came out of retirement to be the president of Prairie View, and it just so happens that one of her students was Jeff Bezos' ex-wife. And she just knows everybody.
Yeah.
It's like, well, who do you want to come to speak? And you just Obama. Okay, when? She's like that person. But anyway, Toni Morrison was a close friend of hers,
Okay.
and Jeff Bezos' wife just gave our school $50 million.
Oh wow.
50.
Yeah.
But one of the first things she did was establish African American studies, because oddly enough, at a lot of black colleges, that's not a major.
Oh.
It's just assumed.
Well, I
It's
mean,
integrated into your history
yeah, yeah.
classes,
I mean,
but
I
it's
could,
not a degree.
right.
Yeah,
I kind of get it, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Probably more white institutions have African American studies as a major than black colleges,
it,
and so she
that
came.
kind of
She's
makes
like, oh,
sense to me, but yeah.
yeah. So she's like, we're going to change that, make sure we're training our students properly. So that being said, I was in the first cohort of,
Okay.
they want my class to be one of the core courses,
Mm-hmm.
African American art history. And there was a gentleman in there who taught history. And he started talking about the history of gynecology and how passionate and the students were about the project. And I was kind of listening to him, and I was like, and I started taking notes, and I was like, yeah, because as black artists, I think at some point, we all address the middle passage in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
We can run from it all we want to, but somehow,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
it's in there. Slavery in the middle
Yeah.
passage. Printing on
Yeah.
cotton is a clear
Yeah.
dynamic, but
Yeah.
excuse me, that's how I started. Listening to those conversations and breakout sessions.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always done work, with art and slavery, but not really a lot in my personal work, other than there is an image of this young slave girl. Her name is Louisa, and she's holding a white baby. And she's looking at, I mean, it's a direct photo. She's looking at you like, I'm holding this baby and y'all still out here acting crazy. That's the vibe
Yeah.
I get from
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that could have been her baby.
Right.
You really don't
Yep.
know.
Right.
And so I've used her image a lot, but that got me to thinking, what happened to Louisa?
Right.
You know, we only know about these women that were butchered because he documented it.
Yes.
What else was happening to slaves in the name of science, right? And they were chattel, they were property.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was absolutely no choice. And so
Correct.
that's where that series, the few pieces that I did, the one that's called Fertility, that's in the Texas Biennial, is an image of one of the figures from the Zélie daguerreotypes.
Mm-hmm.
You familiar with those
Yep. Yep.
photographs?
Yep.
Which again, Delia, they had no choice but to take
Yeah.
off their clothes and look at the camera. So I used her image, printed it on gauze in a brown reddish color,
Mm.
which Lovey always said, "Did you use blood?" I'm like, "No,
No.
I
Yeah.
did not." But it's a gambling sienna, which is a
Yeah.
reddish color. But I printed it on gauze for a couple of reasons. One, because it was gauze,
Mm-hmm.
and two, because there's layers, and as you pull the gauze away, there's another layer of that human in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's shrouded in an Akua fertility doll,
Mm-hmm.
because those women had no fertility after they were butchered.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where that series came from.
Okay. Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodwork her on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also, great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action. Have you ever tried to print on a speculum? Just curious.
No, I haven't. Not yet. Sometimes you have to take a step back.
I know. No, I mean, yeah, this is hitting home for me a lot right now, just because I've been really wanting to dive in. I'm a woodworker, and I don't know actually a ton about furniture design, other than it's always taught as being the product of some European white dude. And so
Right.
because of that, and like in my own process, like I'm a power carver, or carving wood, I really want to dive in and like understand as best I can the history of it and where it comes from, and how it, made its way over to the States and everything like that. And it got me going down this path of trying to find like more scholarly documentation and stuff, and just, discovering, you know, people being enslaved from Africa and coming and fetching a higher price if they came with a
Right.
trade.
If they came with the skills, yes.
Yes. Yet what they created with their hands, if they didn't, if you couldn't point to the white person who quote unquote taught them, then their work
Right.
was seen as crap. Their work was
Yeah.
seen as like,
Tribal.
yeah,
Yeah.
not valuable at all.
Mhm.
And
Probably with the exception of Thomas Day.
yeah, yeah,
He was free. He was free.
yes, the
Uh,
one.
yeah.
um, but that's just the problem too, is like actually trying to dig in and find records
Yeah.
is so hard. Like, to find any record of,
Because the plantation owner was not going to
no,
credit,
exactly. Yeah,
Titus
yeah,
on the plantation when he
right.
was going to make the money.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
yeah, we have a section in our African American art history book by Sharon F. Patton that
Hmm.
focuses on furniture designers.
Hmm.
Um, Thomas Day, Barjan created the first sleigh bed. There's so much there of Dave the Potter.
Hmm.
Every now and then you might see something on the Antique Roadshow. I'm
Right.
kind of I'm
Yeah,
nerdy like that.
yeah,
I'll watch
yeah,
the Antique Roadshow, and
yeah,
every now and then you'll see something.
yeah.
But yeah, there's not a lot of history on it, and we know who. Michelle Obama talked about it. I'm living in a house that my ancestors built by hand,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes, people don't realize the heavy hand of African influence in architecture, the
Yeah.
hidden Adinka symbols,
Yeah.
especially the blacksmiths out of South Carolina,
Hmm.
and they would intricately put the Sankofa
Hmm.
in the gate work,
Yeah.
an homage to the homeland with nobody knowing. It blows
Right.
my mind when I show students what the Sankofa and what the Adinkra symbols are and where they are. They're
Right.
just stunned.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, and that's where I kind of have gotten to so far with the carving. I mean, that's honestly part of what, assuming I can get into grad school, part of what I want to study is like where this comes from, and to
Yeah.
kind of give homage to it in my own way, of whatever way I can. But just finding like carving started in Egypt, which Egypt is in Africa.
Everything started in
Yeah,
Egypt. What didn't
exactly.
start in Egypt?
Yeah. And so it's, but even finding evidence of the Roman Catholics basically trying to erase that fact and saying like, oh no, it started in our
Yeah.
churches. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really?
After Cleopatra died, she started everything.
Yeah. But
And you
maybe
can
I'll
look at
have to
those early,
take a trip to your
right,
school and take some art
field trip.
history. Yes.
And a lot of those early, if you look at those early Greek sculptures before they started perfecting the body, you
Mhm.
can't tell it apart from Egyptian sculpture.
Right.
So the influences, you could lie all you want to, but the influence is there.
I know. So, I mean, since you're teaching art history, you're doing your own art pieces. Do you do any of that yourself, like uncovering or trying to show the artists of the past and their um, influence on our?
In class, I do.
Yeah.
Um, because the book that I teach from that I adore, there's very few African American. There's a lot of art books out there, but there's very few that
Yeah.
are substantial to me.
Yeah.
And the one that I teach from was written in '98.
Okay.
So what I do in my lectures, I mean, I wish I had a teacher like me when I was in school. So cool. But when I was in school, Augusta Savage, Elizabeth Cat, I had to teach myself about them.
Yeah.
Because you didn't see them in the regular art history books.
Yeah.
I had to teach myself. So what I do is within the context of the chapter, I show them what contemporary artists are doing with this same topic now.
Mm,
And they could connect with them that way.
okay.
So I use Hank Willis Thomas a lot, Carrie Mae Weems,
Mm-hmm.
transform she did that series, From Here I Saw What Happened and I Cried, her photographic series.
Mm-hmm.
From that, I created a project called Slavery in 5 Words.
Mm-hmm.
So you're photographing yourself and then you describe slavery in 5 words or less.
Oh wow.
You're thinking about it, you're applying text, and you're exploring photography.
Yeah.
Another project I have them do is imagine that you are a slave on the auction block. If you had to write a letter, because you're a slave that could read and write, who would you write to and what would you say?
Mm-hmm.
They get real emotional about that.
Oh, I'm
Because it
sure.
takes you somewhere. It takes you
Yes.
somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you might have like, Dear God, why is this happening to me? Or then you might have one that says, Master, I should have killed you when I had a chance.
Yes.
I should have put something in your tea.
Yeah.
So, the scope of it, but I find that those assignments really connect with the students. So I tried it, Nicolene Thomas, Deborah Roberts,
Mm-hmm.
insanely exceptional artists.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about Ramir Bearden, I'm going to show you what Deborah Roberts is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to keep it as, I try to stay with them. Well, actually, they try to stay with me.
Yeah.
And then I take my art calls in my studio class because I want them to hear the business of art.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing to be talented. The business of art is a whole, as you
The
know, a whole
whole.
other ball game.
Yes.
And so I'll take those calls, I'll put them on the speaker and I'll let them hear and implore to them that just because you get 500 likes, that does not make you an artist.
Yes.
You know?
If nobody's buying that art, you're still not
Exactly.
able to put food on the
Exactly.
table.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think you are correct that there should have been teachers like you to be able to take class from. That's often something I talk about with guests on the podcast who are coming from a traditional, art college background,
Mm-hmm.
is that like business class is not taught alongside art
Right.
class. And so it's like you have somebody who gets out of school who is talented, and now they're also their own business. They are an entrepreneur and they have no idea how to go and sell their work.
Yes, and these artists sign these terrible contracts,
Mm-hmm.
because they're so excited to be represented by a gallery. You're hot, and all of a sudden you don't have control of your licensing.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have control of the images you photograph because
Mm-hmm.
you're just excited that somebody wrote you a little check,
Right.
and you're going to have a solo show. So the
Yeah.
business of art, I know the University of Houston, they have a couple of classes
Okay.
on art business.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it should be a requirement.
Yes. Yeah. So I want to pivot just into that a little bit. Like how, I mean, was your learning on that all trial and error?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
My gallerist here, who I got through Print Houston,
Hmm.
she was old school Texas. So she could have been Ann Richards' younger sister. You know, she
Okay.
was the big hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
She passed away this year, but she had the big hair and all of that, and it was the best rich people gossip ever. Could just sit there listen to her all day. This is how rich people gossip. This is so cool. But when she saw my work through one of the Print Houston
Mhm.
exhibits, and she said, "I just love your work, and I would love to represent you." And now it's a handshake and a wink. So she was very,
Yeah.
you know, going through the gallery. She got half, I got half. We were good. You
Hmm.
know, she didn't restrict me from showing anywhere else, which
Hmm.
some galleries do. So I was
Yeah.
very fortunate. My gallery in New Orleans, she's awesome, and she's young.
Hmm.
It's two women that run the space, and I trust her completely. So I've been very fortunate. And then Delita, who has just been on fire, listening to her, and she'll tell
Hmm.
us everything. Look at this, don't sign this, make sure you have control of that. So
Hmm.
I've been fortunate that I've been around a good group of people to kind of nurture
Hmm.
my business. Yeah.
Do you do you feel like at all, if you hadn't been able to kind of work in on that collaboration of Print Houston, do you feel like it would have been harder to get your foot in the door?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Even though what I do is unique,
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen people who do printing processes on leaves,
Hmm.
but not feathers and cotton and
Hmm.
other stuff. And I don't ever want it to be perceived as a gimmick because it's very serious to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
especially the cotton,
Hmm.
because there's a direct correlation between that cotton and slavery.
Hmm.
And all of that was inspired by seeing the work of Alison Sarr in person.
Okay.
Um, so, yeah, I almost forgot the question. I'm sorry.
No, just having
So,
having harder time getting in.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Prior to, I would always send out for exhibitions. In
Hmm.
early days, you had to have slides,
Hmm.
and it was a disc, and now
Hmm.
everything is digital. So, it's hit or miss. You just learn to take, if they say no, try harder,
Hmm.
and the show you just knew you were going to get into and you don't get into, keep fighting it. And
Hmm.
so Houston is an interesting community because there's not a lot of hateration. We
Hmm.
kind of embrace each other and are very supportive, and it's not cliquish or circle-ish. People just know people, and if your work is good, it's good. If it's for this space, it's for this space. So once we started really kicking off Print Houston, I just totally focused on printmaking and pushing the boundaries of printmaking, which would then lead to speaking at art conferences or
Hmm.
panel discussions. And all of that
Yeah.
helps you grow as an artist, like your show as well.
Yep. Yep.
All of that exposure helps.
Hmm.
I'm not trying to pimp myself out because once you
No,
get
go for it.
at
I
a
allow
certain,
anybody to put themselves out on
yeah,
the show.
but once you get to a certain age,
Yeah.
it's like either you like it or you don't.
Yep.
But I'm not going to stop doing what I do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm always going to probably work in series.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I said, like, to be completely frank, like this whole, even just going for my master's and going down this, I want to get into 3D design is what I
Hmm.
want to study. um has me quite terrified because
Yeah.
I don't have this art background, and I'm like, I feel like the hick that's trying to like sneak in.
Yeah. I understand the fear because technology is fearful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and I work in the School of Architecture, even that's where the art department
Yeah.
is at my school. So they do a lot of 3D printing and things like that.
Hmm.
So there may be a different avenue for you to walk into as opposed to just art and
Yeah.
sculpture. Like when I
Yeah.
went to the academy, they didn't know where to put me.
Mm-hmm.
because at that time I was doing my hoop dreaming series. I was only doing basketball hoops.
Okay.
So they were like, maybe we're thinking about putting you in sculpture. And I started reading the curriculum, and I'm like, I'm not going to blow my house up trying to do all this stuff, you know. And so the first class I took was mixed media,
Mm-hmm.
a professor, Carrie Ann Plank, and she was a printmaker.
Okay.
And then she taught us how to do transfer printing
Mm-hmm.
and print on wax and all this kind of cool stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
said, my good friend Lauren Kelly said, go with printmaking, learn the skill.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my path.
Yeah. That again, touring, they said, okay, like you'll apply for your primary, right? But then when you
Mm-hmm.
come, you got to add something else on. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
oh. And I'm thinking I want to add graphic design, not because I have any background in it, but because I'm thinking like a business person. And I'm like, what costs me the most money every year is hiring out a
Yeah.
graphic designer
Yeah.
to do all of my like logo work or, whatever kind of things I have to
But
do.
it does take a lot of time, though. All that.
I
I
know.
mean, I do. I have my little 15 minutes with Soul that I do on IG
Yeah,
occasionally, and all that little graphic stuff. It takes time.
it does. It does take
Yeah.
time.
Well, one of the things I learned from Creative Capital is have a 10-minute art meeting with yourself every day.
Okay.
If it's just at the very least 10 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
that could be answering emails, cleaning up a graphic or whatever, but just
Yes.
spend that 10 minutes every day working on updating your bio or
Mm-hmm.
website or whatever.
That's
So I've always
really, yeah,
remembered that.
that's really good advice.
Yeah.
Because I definitely don't give myself that time.
Right.
So okay, you talked about the show that's coming up with the ironing boards.
Yes.
Do you have any other shows that are on
I
the
do.
horizon?
I don't know if you've ever heard of Project Row Houses in Houston. Um,
Mm-mm.
oh yeah, look them up. It's Rick Lowe. He won the MacArthur 2 years ago.
Okay.
But there's row houses are shotgun houses
Yep.
in
Yep.
Texas, and so he took a whole street of shotgun houses and transformed them, so artists can come in and you can do whatever you want to with the
Oh
space.
wow.
And I think they're up to I did round 8 and round 12, and now they're up to round 50 something. They do it
Oh,
twice a year.
okay.
And so Rue is actually going to be in this next round, which is focusing on critical race theory. So it's going to be real interesting uh, what we put in that house.
Uh,
And yeah, artists come from all over the country to do
mhm.
this. That Whitfield Lavelle, I'll never forget. He was in the very first round. Whitfield Lavelle does those beautiful drawings on wood.
Mhm.
And I remember the day they took the wall. Somebody bought the walls out of the house.
Oh
I'll
wow.
never forget that. I'll never forget that. But so Row Houses is coming up in March. Lawndale is January. I'm actually going to be in North Dakota at the Plains Art Museum for my first museum solo there.
Oh nice.
And others, I'll be at the Kayla Art Institute in Berkeley for a residency. So yeah.
When you're out in these galleries and stuff, do you, especially around, I mean, around things like critical race theory and stuff, are you getting pushback from those who come to the show at all?
I wouldn't know because for COVID I haven't been anywhere, but I
Yeah.
usually don't. I usually
Okay.
don't. The art crowd is different.
Yeah.
They're more of a liberal crowd, at least willing to listen.
Yes.
You know, I hear some things occasionally.
Yeah.
It's usually the husbands in a circle. The wives are somewhere. Like, oh, this is
Yeah.
fascinating, and the husbands are in the corner talking golf and politics. Yeah. But for the most part, I have not had that experience. I'm in a show
Okay.
now in Amarillo, Texas, that's focusing on race. There's a lot of immigration type pieces in
Hmm.
that show. But the piece I have in there actually does say 1619 on it,
Mm.
and it's called "Stop Erasing Our History."
Yes.
And I mean, I haven't. No one has come at me personally
Good.
with that. Yeah,
It was
I'm ready for them
actually
now.
it was actually 1619. Again, I'm not super far into it yet, but it was actually 1619 in her opening essay about patriotism that like explained to me, you know, some why so many Black people enroll in military service.
Mhm.
And the idea of them being more patriotic, I personally am not very patriotic, and that might lose me some people who listen to my podcast, but oh well.
Mhm.
So that thought of 1619 and basically because you built this country,
Right.
like it's your country way more than
Right.
it is our
Right.
country.
At the time the soldiers were fighting, they still didn't have equal rights.
Exactly. And they were
So
fighting
it
two wars. They were fighting for their own
right,
freedom and
right.
for the freedom of a country. Yeah.
Well, think about if your mindset is you have more freedom going to a war to fight for your freedom
Yep.
than living in the
Yeah.
South. That says all it has to say right there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that really just, I mean, it didn't blow my mind. It kind of, it made some things make sense to me
Right.
of just being an observer in the world.
Hmm.
It made some
Yeah.
things make sense. And um, yeah, it just, I'm glad to hear that there's more people, I guess, reading, listening, and trying
Yeah.
to get the information out there.
And her story is interesting. Now, this is, you know what happened to her last year?
I don't
She,
actually.
she was a professor at the University of North Carolina,
Okay.
and I believe she won the Pulitzer for 1619.
Hmm.
They denied her tenure at the University of North Carolina
Oh my
for
gosh.
for critical race theory because that was the hot term. Yeah, isn't that crazy? They
That is
denied her.
crazy.
You're denying a Pulitzer Prize winning faculty member over some political foolery.
Yeah.
And so the students protested, the faculty all supported her.
Yeah.
It was the board,
The board.
the
Yeah.
regents, the board of
Yeah.
regents that was like, no, so she left and went to Howard.
Yeah.
Good for her. That was their
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah, exactly. That is their laws. I mean,
Yeah,
that's crazy. Yeah. I
it's
mean,
ridiculous.
I don't understand this whole like thing against critical race theory because, like you just said, it's erasing history. To me, it's
Yeah.
like don't even put that title on it. It's just
Well,
it.
it's taught in law school. It's
Yeah.
nothing that's taught in
Yeah.
grade school. It's they've just hijacked it. Like the
Yes.
term woke. I hate to hear Fox News say woke. Not that I watch Fox News,
I say, don't
but
tell me to watch Fox News.
I do not. I do not at all. Ugh, I could just my stomach is churning just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But just that whole group of people saying woke all
Yes.
of a sudden,
Yeah.
hijacking the culture. Critical race theory came, I believe, vocally came about after George Floyd. You want to know why people are burning down cities and
Yeah.
things? Where is this rage coming from?
Yeah.
Why are certain people being stopped and other people being allowed to walk away
Yep.
from a traffic stop?
Yep.
That is studied in graduate school and it's not taught in elementary school.
No.
So it's being merged with history.
Yes.
And so, February is going to be real interesting. Black History Month. It's going to be real interesting this year.
Yeah.
So it's just so ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I thought people were smarter than that, but I'm clearly wrong.
You and me both are clearly wrong on that.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's heightened the awareness that, like my wife and I, we have kids. And so it's
Mhm.
like heightened the awareness of how important it is that
Yeah.
we play a role in um, teaching our kids and
Right.
informing them and making sure that all of these things are not
Yeah.
erased. I mean, just
Right.
and they happen to go to a school that's very liberal, and so
Mhm.
things like my oldest, who's only 8, but he learned, I would say, the truth about Christopher
Mhm.
Columbus, and so he comes home and
Good.
he's like, Christopher Columbus is a big fat jerk, and I just don't understand why anybody, like, he just goes
Yeah.
out. It's like, you're right. You are
That's
absolutely right.
right. That's right. It's the a lot, especially larger cities,
Mhm.
have changed the name. You
Mhm.
know, the
Yep.
funniest thing in 2020 when we were in quarantine, that you know to get a good laugh was something that we all desired. I will never forget the Boston Globe. It was on the front page. Christopher Columbus statue beheaded and thrown in the Boston River. That was the, you know, that was the funniest thing to me. You know, he was beheaded and thrown in the river.
Yes.
But, you know, you want to understand why people are furious with these monuments.
Yes.
You know, George Floyd, that's been happening. We've been seeing that for years. It's just
Right.
that the world saw it.
Right.
You know,
Yep.
NWA and all that stuff, they preached about it
Mm-hmm.
in the early days of hip hop. They weren't
Mm-hmm.
lying about this.
No.
It's just that the world saw it.
Yes.
You know, as tragic as it
The
was.
world saw it, and we didn't have anything. There was no way of escaping it.
Right. Because we were at home, we were quarantined, we
That's,
were
I think
trapped.
that's the biggest key to me, is I feel like
Yeah.
we have unfortunately continued to see and see and see.
Mm-hmm.
And because we're not willing to stop, we being people who look like myself, are not willing
Mm-hmm.
to stop and look in the mirror and say,
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move on, we keep scrolling, we find something
Yeah.
else, you know,
Because
we,
you're safe.
because
You're
we're
in a safer
safe.
space. Yeah.
Yes, we're in a safer
Mm-hmm.
space, and we don't want to feel uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah. That's
We
true.
weren't allowed to move away from that.
Mm-hmm.
We were not
Mm-hmm.
allowed to move away from that. And
Yeah.
I'm thankful for that. I feel like I've been on this journey most of my adult life, trying to understand why I never felt like what I was being taught in
Mm-hmm.
my, you know, family of origin was correct. I
Mm-hmm.
I always felt like wrong about
Yeah.
what things were being said. And so I feel like I've been on this journey my whole adult life of like trying to
Mm-hmm.
understand and learn more and
Mm-hmm.
just do my own work. Um,
Yeah.
and so as I never would want something like George Floyd to happen. Um,
Right.
however, I do feel like I was glad that it happened with COVID in the sense
Mm-hmm.
that it made other people have to stop.
You had to stop. You couldn't escape it.
You couldn't
You could
escape.
not escape it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it brought on something that I felt was
Yeah. And the
so,
case too, because
yeah,
COVID went on so long,
yep,
you know, watching the court case, you
yeah,
know, our expectations were, you know, because it's happened so many times. And
mm-hmm,
that's where my sunglasses series comes from. You can't see what I can see,
mm-hmm,
you know, because I'm seeing this happening, but then these people are being acquitted because you're
yep,
now telling me I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. That
yes,
goes back to Rodney King,
yeah.
you know,
I
and
mean,
it's like,
it's the biggest
right.
gaslighting ever.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah,
we all knew that once
yeah,
that little boy did his performance on the stand, we all knew he was going to get off. It wasn't even, you know,
yeah,
we all knew that,
yeah,
you know. And then where are these prosecuting attorneys coming from? Really, dude?
right.
I mean, look, we all watched Matlock or Law and
Yeah,
Order, and so the judge wouldn't let you use the iPad. Bring in a poster. What are you doing?
right,
I'm just like, oh my god. It's like you're on their team too.
right.
It makes you wonder.
Yes,
It makes you
yes,
wonder.
yes.
So yeah, it's unfortunate. You know, you would think in 2022 we'd be in a
Mhm.
better place, but that last administration had us going so far backwards, and the hoods are off. You know, it's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah,
But I'm always going to believe there's more good people than bad. You know, I'm always going to believe that.
yeah. And I actually I do think to some degree that even somebody who so vehemently is on the other side can learn. It's just
Hmm.
at what level do you have to, um, what has to happen in their life?
Yeah,
Uh, how personal does it have to get? That's my always
exactly.
my
I think that's
question.
the key.
Yes,
How
how
personal
personal?
does it have to get? You
Yeah,
know, especially, you know, shootings. You know, does it
yep,
have to be at your kid's school for you to
yep,
get it?
yep,
You
yep.
know? Yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
Hmm.
Um, well, I'm watching the time. So we're at the end of our
Hey.
time together, but I have so
Oh,
enjoyed our
Skipper.
conversation. Um,
Likewise. Thank you for reaching out.
yeah, absolutely. And I want to give you another opportunity to let people know like how they can find you, follow along with you, and see all
Oh,
the work
sure.
you're up to.
Um, a lot of my new work is posted on Instagram at Soul Sister Art, SOLE. And my website is soulsisterart.com.
Okay.
So you can find me there, updates. Okay, I have to have you on 15 Minutes with Soul. I'm going to try to stay for 15 minutes. I'm going to try. I haven't done it yet. That's one thing that COVID, you know, has a lot of us doing our podcasts and things
Yes,
like things that
yes.
I never thought I would ever do. Um, and by the way, I meant to give you a shout out on your 80s video. I do
Yeah.
every single song.
Woohoo!
Since the Go Go's have been, you know, they were just put in the Rock and Roll
Yeah,
Hall of Fame, I'm like, oh, they got the beat. You know, oh, God,
that's
I know
right.
all that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure that all those links are included for the show
I
notes so
appreciate
people
you.
can easily find you. And thanks for chatting with me again today.
Oh, thank you. It's been awesome. It's been
Yeah,
awesome. I appreciate you so much for reaching out.
same. All right. So again, that was Ann Johnson, and I will include the links on how you can follow along with her and see all the work she's producing and what shows she's in, all that good stuff, and the show notes for today's episode. So the best places to find those show notes is check out the description for the episode in your podcast app. If you are watching this on YouTube, check the description box down below. And then lastly, you can head on over to freemanfurnishings.com/podcast, and you'll find today's episode show notes with links, as well as all the past episodes, all the way back to the very beginning, even when it was called the Maker Mom Podcast. When I am not interviewing fantastic guests and making podcast episodes, you can find me designing and making furniture and other home decor at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across all the social media platforms. I am most active though over at Instagram. I'm usually on there every day, so you can come on over at Freeman Furnishings and say hey. And while you're over there, make sure to follow along with the podcast as well at Crafting Revolution. Okay, again, welcome back. Happy 2022, everybody. And I will be back Friday with another brand new episode. In the meantime, let's go craft a revolution.